the whole world, right, can see the atrocities that the military is committing, right? Everything is caught on camera, everything is going over Facebook, Twitter, right? But then they feel that nobody's acting on it.
What do you know about the military coup in Myanmar? I recently spoke with two members of the Burmese community here in the DC metro area, Htoo of Nationalities Alliance of Burma, USA, and Terence of Calvary Burmese Church. They explained to me why the coup happened, what civilians in Myanmar are experiencing, the Burmese people's hope for the future, and how the international community can get involved. You may know a lot about this crisis in Myanmar, or you may know nothing at all. But I believe that we come to a deeper understanding of the world and the people in it when we choose to listen to each other. So I'm stepping up and inviting you to listen, to understand.
So my name is Terence too, and I came to the United States about 12, 13 years ago, in 2008. I'm a current ethnic from Myanmar.
So my name is Htoo. I'm also originally from Myanmar, also known as Burma. I've been here since 2010. Currently, I live in Maryland, United States, and I'm Kachin ethnic group.
Can you, in brief, give just a little bit of a background on the country of Myanmar?
Myanmar is located in Southeast Asia, which the neighboring country are China, Thailand, India, Bangladesh. So, which is a kind of very, the very poorest country in Asia at the moment. So we just had the democracy, the political movement last 5 years ago, and then we had the, the military coup in February 1st, 2021, which is a brief summary of our country. Yeah.
What has happened within the last few months, and why did this military coup happen?
We don't really know the exact reason why the military decided to stage a coup, because they had it very good, all the plans and everything. They made the 2008 constitution, which basically gave them control over 3 key ministries: the Ministry of Home Affairs, the Ministry of Defense, and Ministry of Border. So basically, by having control of those 3 ministries or departments, they basically have a lot of control over what they can do in the country. They have control over a lot of financial resources and companies because of that. And then the other thing was that they also gave themselves 25% of the parliamentary seats in both chambers of their legislative branch. And then so those people that the 25%, they're not elected by the people, they're appointed by the military members, and those 25% is a guarantee. And then in order to change that constitution that gave them so much power, you need more than 75% of the legislative branch, voting to get rid of the constitution, and then you need a referendum, by the people in order to, change that. So they actually had like a really good, deal going on, a really sweet deal for them. So we don't really understand why they did that, but some people speculate that there was like a power struggle within the military group. So the commander-in-chief Min Aung Hlaing, he's 64 right now. So in Burma's basically, among the military ranks, if you're 65, then there's a mandatory retirement age. So maybe he staged a coup to basically say that I'm the boss, I'm in charge, so I'm gonna take over basically. And then the other thing was that basically in 2010 was the first time where they opened up elections for the people. And even that wasn't a really free election because the military-backed party still won. But in 2015 was finally when the elections were really open, and then Aung San Suu Kyi's party won by a landslide. And 2020 they won even more, like the percentages went higher. So maybe the military felt threatened.
Yeah. And this is the National League for Democracy. That's
National League for Democracy. So they felt threatened that their power and their influences waning over the years. So maybe like they're like, okay, we shouldn't risk this anymore, we should just take it back over. So these are just basically educated guesses, but to be honest, like I don't think that nobody has a straight answer of why they did that.
So the military didn't give any reason as to why they arrested Aung San Suu Kyi or other leaders?
They did give a reason. So like their reasoning was that basically there was voter fraud in the 2020 November elections, but they weren't able to provide evidence for the voter fraud. And they're just basically using that as a reason. And then eventually they say that because there was voter fraud and because there was instability within the country, we need to take over in order to restore peace and order. And there's actually a clause in the constitution that they made that allowed them to do that according to that constitution, so they were able to do that. And then they basically charged their reason for capturing Aung San Suu Kyi and then the president Myint was that they basically came up with phony reasons to arrest them and to charge them. So for Aung San Suu Kyi, one of the reasons was that she imported walkie-talkies from a foreign country, so that's somehow illegal. And then for President Myint, I think he went outside of his residence to like wave at some crowd, some people that were in front of his residence. So they said that this is violating the COVID protocol, the not so you can't gather during the during the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So basically they charge him for that, but we all know that those are just phony reasons.
What does this coup mean for civilians?
Previously the peace process have failed to consider the diverse vision of peace among the numerous ethnic communities across Myanmar. Like I am Kachin and Terence too, he's the Karen ethnic. We are different ethnic group. So we're choosing instead of rely on this vision of alliance and arms actor. So Myanmar is embroiled in a political and humanitarian crisis. So as of April 8, the peaceful protester in Myanmar have been met with the coordinated attack by the Tamil, including arbitrary detention, releasing arms, and drug prisoner to attack the protester, and seizing a neighborhood place, poisoning water supply, and other acts of the terror as well. So on February 28 and March 27 has been the deadliest day for the country since the beginning of the coup. So over the course of 48 hours, the armed military forces brutally murdered 30 Myanmar civilians and left thousands injured. So healthcare workers and emergency medical vehicles have also been targeted by the Tamil. Additionally, while these violent crackdowns have been occurring, government hospitals have been rid of essential equipment and rendering them incapable of providing adequate emergency care for injured civilians as well. So, and then the other thing that we can see, that thousands of innocent people in Myanmar have been left in state of the uncertainty, and then reminded of the bloody 1988 uprising, during which the student organized a national protest and demanding democratic rule were met with the violence and thousands of the casualties. And then no ethnic minority have been spared from the military detention, especially at the border area. So many people have fled Myanmar and internally displaced. So dating further back, the conflict between the Karen, Kachin, like me, myself, and Terence too, and all the ethnic people and the military is the longest internet war in Myanmar and the longest civil war in the world, spanning more than 7 decades. Since 2021, more than 4,000 Karen people, more than 120 Kachin people, Kachin ethnic people, more than 70,000 Rakhine have been displaced by the military coup, which is the huge amount, huge number. So the lives of millions of people are at the stake. So we already knew that the COVID-19 pandemic has compounded the implication of the ongoing conflict and placing civilians in precaution situation. So people in Myanmar are also grappling with poverty and food insecurity due to the disruption to the economy. So citizens across Myanmar, including China, have taken to the street to protest the wrongful denial of the right to democracy and government transparency. So also, civil servants had resigned from their position as they refused to serve under the military coup. So for the past few months, military leadership were angry that the result of the November 2020 election at Myanmar, Obama, that Terence too already mentioned about this. So NLD won 83% of the available seats in Myanmar House of Representatives and House of Nationalities, similar to America House Representatives and Senate respectively. So what followed was a series of failed attempts by the military to appeal the Burmese Supreme Court to overturn the election results on counts of voter fraud. So on February 1st, 2021, the Myanmar Parliament was supposed to have its parliamentary session to convene and approve the elected seats of both House of Myanmar Congress. But the Myanmar military, the Tamil state that is needed to take action against fraudulent election themselves and soldier forcefully surrounded at the heart of the parliament. Terence also mentioned about that, but I just added a little bit. So they detained many prominent NLD figure, the most notable figure being Aung San Suu Kyi, the Nobel Peace Prize winning leader of the NLD, and who is immensely popular within Myanmar. And the other one is our president, Myint. This was immediately followed by the Tamil censoring the press, and then the shutting down the internet, closing bank, and cutting off global communication, and announcing the state of the emergency. Currently, innocent people in Myanmar are being subjected to the oppressive rule of a dangerous military dictatorship that undermine the will of the people.
What are you hearing on the grounds? For a while, as M2 mentioned, there was communication cutoffs for a few months, but what are you hearing on the ground from civilians, maybe even like people you may know, family or friends?
They're worried during the day and they're worried at night, so they don't really get to sleep, because what the military does is that at first they're just saying that we're shooting at protesters because these protesters are violating the law by going outside, right? But now they're going to people's houses to arrest some people without any warrants or any cause, and then in extreme cases they would shoot at those people too, and they would do the same thing at night. So people are really weary, and people are really afraid of what's going on. And then they're also, of course, they're worried that the internet is going to be cut off completely. I think when the coup started, the military council would cut off the internet between 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. if I remember correctly, and then people would get back their internet. But now they're starting to cut off Wi-Fi and all that, and then this some people still have the fiber internet left. So people are also thinking about ways to to have a plan B. If internet is completely cut off, then what can we do? Some people go even as far as asking Elon Musk to supply Burma with the satellite internet. And of course, that's the long shot, and that's a different story. But people are really, they're afraid, they're weary, and and then the other question that they have is that the whole world, right, can see the atrocities that the military is committing, right? Everything is caught on camera, everything is going over Facebook, Twitter, right? But then they feel that nobody's acting on it. They feel that the United Nations, for example, is releasing statement after statement condemning the military, but then they're not really, at least to them, right? What they feel is that the United Nations is just all talk and no action, right? So they're just hoping that somebody outside would see this and then do something about it, do something fruitful about it.
Yeah, if I can follow up on that point real quickly. In the beginning of February, Joe Biden, he had a press conference where he talked about how the Burmese military needs to give back the power, and he was condemning the violence, condemning the arrests. And then a little less than 2 months later, we see these protests happen on March 27, civilians being killed. And so I can definitely understand that sentiment that a lot of people feel from the international community, being that there's so much talk but no action. What are some specifics? And M2, you can chime in as well. But what are some specifics that the Burmese people are hoping that the international community responds with?
Oh, so especially the Burmese people, Myanmar people, hope that the international community must putting pressure on the junta, the military coup, to the destroying the junta's economic empire. So now the U.S., UK already sanctioned a lot of the military-related economic business, all the business and other company as well. But we need to we need all the international community, not only the US and UK. They also have the business with the Southeast Asian, China, the Vietnam and things like that. So much, all the international community need to the destroying gender economic. That is very important to to shut down the military coup. And then another one is to deny the gender international support. So many people keep stop supporting the military agenda. For example, like March 27. So kind of the Russia, China, India, and other the Asian country, about 10 countries, they are involving in these event, March 27 event. So we have to stop these international to support the military gender. And then the other one is to deny the gender ability to run the functioning government, which is also important, not only the domestic, but also the international as well. Like, in United States, they have the 3 different, the embassy location. One is in Washington, D.C., another one is in California, and another one is in New York. So, but they are still functioning. But like the in London, it just happened. The military coup seized the embassy in London. It's happened yesterday. So then that is another issue. So another one, the international community need to deny the gender the ability to spread the propaganda. So you might probably know the military coup just hire a lobby from the Canada, and then they also let the lobby guy just sent out the CNN reporter just a couple of days ago. So that we need to stop that these kind of the propaganda, and then international community also need to isolate the senior general Min Aung Hlaing within the military. So some, like I mentioned earlier before, some countries are stay involved in the military activity. And then another one, so international community immediately and unconditionally release to those already because of the military coup, because like we mentioned earlier before, the military coup arrested the Aung San Suu Kyi and the president Myint, right? So they need to international community need to pressure the military coup immediately and the unconditionally release all those detained. And then also need to pressure the military that immediately restore all forms of the communication, including the access to the internet, and restore the free travel, and then return the power to all members of the civilians.
The Burmese people hope that the international community can put more pressure on Min Aung Hlaing and the military officers in power. But what does that pressure look like?
The pressure is a kind of this military they have the very huge business they are doing by themselves, but it's being they've been doing several decades ago for their for their family and for the top leader. So they have the international business they are dealing with. For example, kind of the a sync-up company called the Myint. they've been dealing with the Vietnam, and they got a lot of money from that company. So in our United States, no military they're doing such an economic with other countries, right? Sorry. But in Myanmar, the military has their business, hundreds of thousands of the business owned by the military. So they use the people money to run their business for their profit, for their family. So that's the thing. That's why the international community need to put in the pressure on the junta, not to support with the military-related company. So the United States just the sanction and the MEC,
Myanmar Economic Corporation.
Yes, yeah. And MELD, yeah, another one.
MEHL.
Oh, MEHL, yes. Those two are very huge company related with the military.
He mentioned at the beginning that Burma is one of the poorest countries, right? So in reality, Burma is actually very rich in terms of natural resources. We have, ruby, jade. We have other kinds of, a lot of metals and, many things. The reason Burma is poor is because of the military. Burma, I believe, in the early 1800s or something like that, was known as the rice bowl of Asia because, they have a lot of farmers and, they were able to produce and export rice from their country. And people were like prosperous to a degree, right? But with the military, basically everything that the country makes goes into their pockets, and the people are left to starve and to struggle. So that's why it's one of the poorest countries. And like Kodu already mentioned, the United States imposed sanctions for the military generals and their family members. So in terms of basically barring them from coming to the United States, or in terms of freezing their financial assets, or imposing targeted sanctions on the Myanmar Economic Corporation and Myanmar Economic Holdings Limited. Those are big companies. It hurts them a lot. But at the same time, even though the United States have done that, the military is still able to function because there are a lot of countries that are on their side. For example, China, for example, Russia, and in Southeast Asia, we know for sure that there are some companies in Singapore, Vietnam, the list goes on, that they know that if they are working together with the military, they can continue to profit. So they're continue to do that. So as long as they're doing that, the military is going to be able to sustain itself, and it's going to be difficult. So we have to think of other ways that the international community can pressure these countries. And one of those ways is that basically there's something called the global arms embargo. So there are some countries smaller countries like Singapore and Belarus, for example, that are selling arms to the Burmese military. So we're hoping that countries like the United States and the United Kingdom can pressure those smaller countries to not sell arms to Burma, to the Burmese military. And that way it might make a difference. It might be hard for them to pressure a bigger country like China, but it might be feasible to pressure smaller countries, because that's more realistic in our opinion. And the people are also hoping that maybe they could support the armed ethnic groups. So the armed ethnic groups have been around for 70 years, since Burma's independence, because the ethnic groups, they don't really want to live under the Burmese rule. So they have always wanted their own country in the past, or at least they want their own autonomous state where they're part of the country, but they still get to decide their own affairs, right? So they have those armed groups that are protecting the civilians from the atrocities committed by the Burmese military. So these ethnic groups already have armies, but of course they're not supported by China. They're not supported by other international groups. So they need the funding, they need the technology support in order to go head to head with the Burmese military. So we're hoping that even if the United States, right, doesn't want to send their troops, because that's a whole other issue, right? Because we don't want another Vietnam, we don't want another Iraq, right? So totally understandable, but they can, I believe that they can spare some of their funding, that they're going to give to Burma anyways, and then channel that to the ethnic groups, and that way they have the resources to fight back the Burmese military.
What do we know about Min Aung Hlaing, and what is the perception of his leadership?
He's about to retire in, I think, June, right? June
I
2021.
think he was gonna turn he's gonna turn 65 in July. I believe
Oh
so.
yeah, 65 in July. So there's one reason. Another reason you might probably remember that he being charged by the ICJ, right? And then the Aung San Suu Kyi protect him and defend him at the ICJ. So there's another reason. The ICJ going to, take an action to Myint Aung Hlaing as well very soon. That will be a kind of the Rohingya issue. So that will be his position, and then he's facing. This is another kind of the reason that he see the power on February 1st.
And then in terms of the people from Burma, I guess you could say that he sort of became a meme, where I don't know how tall he is, but people make fun of his height a lot. I don't think he's that short, but like he's I think 5'5" or below, and so people make fun of his height because like they don't like him. So basically, what I'm trying to say is that even though like he is holding this like mighty position in the military, like the people despise him. Like literally like zero people that are not related to the military like him at all. So they make fun of his height, and then also in English it might not like make that much sense, but basically his initials in Burmese are basically like the acronym for a cuss word. So it's like as if his initials are like WTF, for example. So people use that to make fun of him as well. So a lot of people despise him. They would they would print out his pictures, and then they would put it on the ground, and then people would like stomp on it to show that they don't like him, and things like that. And they would even like record a video of like this like dog on the street like walking onto it. So they're saying that even dogs don't respect him. So really like he doesn't really have charisma. And then there was a press conference that he took part like a few weeks after the coup, I believe. I don't remember the timeline, but he was basically speaking, and then people were criticizing him a lot for that, saying how like he doesn't look like a leader at all, it doesn't look confident at all, and things like that. So among the people though, like nobody likes him and nobody thinks that he's charismatic or anything like that. And I want to like contrast that with some other dictators, like for example like Fidel Castro from Cuba, or even Adolf Hitler from Germany. At least those people, a big number of their people thought that they were charismatic, that they were like genuine leaders. But Myint Aung Hlaing, on the other hand, like really like no decent person thinks that he is the leader.
He has gone on record saying that in a year's time he will hold democratic elections again. Do people believe him?
No, not at all.
And even if he, let's say, stays true to his word and there's an election, it's probably going to be an actually rigged election, where the majority of the seats will be won by the party that the military is backing.
Yeah, looking forward, and I just have a couple questions more. Looking forward, when you talk with people on the ground in Myanmar, like what is the hope for the future?
So I was born in Burma, and then I grew up under an education system taught by controlled by the military dictatorship. So it was also a military dictatorship back then until like around like 2010 2015 ish. So when in our classrooms, basically they inhibit critical thinking and creativity, and even like essay questions, for example, they will like have a like an essay prompt, right? And then the teacher will like write down the government approved response on the blackboard, and then we copy it down word for word, and we memorize it, and then we know that that question is going to be on the exam, and so we then rewrite it word for word. And if you like let's say they miss a comma or something, then you lose a point, right? So that kind of education system where like you're not really you know encouraged to think, you're not really like push or empower to have your own kind of thinking, right? So people don't want to go back to that. And then the other thing is in terms of electricity, in terms of power outages, right? So when I grew up with power outages all the time, like every other day, or even like 4 or 5 days out of the week. And that's because the military government, basically what they do is that they would try to conserve some of the power so that they can sell it to other countries or other, companies for profit. And then they would, the kids of the military members, they would have electricity every single day. They would, and Burma is a tropical country, so it's really hot during the summertime. So like at night, they would like have air conditioning and everything. But we sleep, we sleep with like a handheld fan like this, and then we go to bed, right? So like people don't want, their kids to like, go back to, that kind of time, right? And then the other thing is that during that 5 years, like from 2015 to 2020, those 5 years, there was a lot of education reform. Like in Burma, like we, the kid, not me, but like the kids, they started learning about a lot of things that we hadn't learned before. They started learning about critical thinking, creativity, and all that. They even learn about, sex education, which is an important, part of the curriculum. So, because these kids are exposed to these like new things, they no longer want to go back to the dark ages, right? They don't want that for their younger siblings. They don't want that for their children. So they want, a democracy. And then, so that's, in terms of like what I've, heard from my friends and, my friends' siblings and all that. But in terms of, what the, I'm doing a mention about the ethnic minorities too, right? So I'm an ethnic minority myself. So in terms of the ethnic minority, what they want is a federal democracy. So in 2008, the constitution that was written, it's sort of like democratic, but it's not really, because the military still had a lot of control, and then there was still a lot of persecution of ethnic minorities. But now, the ethnic minorities are coming together, and they're working together with the Burmese majority, and then they're fighting for something called a federal democracy, where Burma, all the people, all the states will stay together. It's just like the United States. They will be together, but then they would be able to decide their own, state's affairs, right? So for example, in Maryland, we have our own driving laws, that are like slightly different from DC or Virginia, right? In terms of education, our curriculum is slightly different from, not everything is centralized. Basically, we have our own. Every state has their own say, right? So they want that kind of democracy where every state, every ethnic group can have their own take in governance.
So the parents and the grandparents today, young people know that what is like back then, and the bitter the experience has been recounted to their children and grandchildren. Young Myanmar people doesn't want the cloud turned back, so they will not be silenced. So that so there one example, the one the 19-year-old, the Taekwondo champion and the dancer Chal Sin, and also known as the Angel, was wearing "Everything Will Be Okay" shirt when securing forces gunned her down. So in Mandalay, so thousands of young people like her continue to stand on the street each day, so full of defend opposition, and they face the military and they courageously demand the country they want and deserve. So, even the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has stressed there is only one way forward. So the security force must stop the violence. The general must return the Myanmar to the democratic pathway, respecting the results of last year election. So, and the political prisoner must be free. That will be our hope for the future. And then only, there be progress on the reform to deliver kind of like the fair economic development and human rights, including freedom of movement, including the right of the safe return for the refugee and citizenship, and on controlling of the spread of the virus. Now the pandemic happening, and so the people are dying not because of the pandemic, but because of the military coups. So only a social society, that invests in its very humanity can be at a peace with itself. That's all. I just like to add about our future.
The last question I have for the both of you, maybe Terence, we can start with you, is how can the common person learning about what is going on in Myanmar get involved and learn more?
So even though like Burma is a foreign issue, like the United States as a world power, should be interested in what's happening in Burma, because Burma is sort of like this like really nice place in Southeast Asia, right? So if China has complete control over that country, China's power is just going to be, growing exponentially. So And then, I don't have anything against the Chinese people, but the Chinese government, though, is a different story. The Chinese government, we know that they are corrupt, that they are authoritarian, right? Even though they claim to be democratic. So the United States, as a democratic nation, shouldn't want that, right? So, the people in the United States should care about that as well, because, China is sort of like, the next USSR, right? We didn't want the USSR to have power as well. So like that kind of thing. And so the people from the United States, what they can do is they can definitely, call their congressional representatives and senators, and they have meetings with them. Sometimes I found that like when Americans contact their Congress, when I say Americans, I'm talking about like native born Americans. When they contact their congressman, they have like a better response. I don't know if it is because of the last name or anything like that, but like I've talked to this senator from Kansas, Senator Jerry Moran, his staff, and then also Senator Bill Haggerty from Tennessee about Burma's issues. But each of those times, somebody with a an English last name, was able to like get us, the meeting. But like when I try to do on my own, where like reaching out to like Maryland senators, whatever, like maybe they were busy, maybe it's other reasons, but like it's harder for me to like get through the door. So definitely I think that people born in the United States, people who have a lot of connections, they can use those connections to good use, and definitely like amplify the voices of the Burmese Americans, like Go Emtuang or me. So that's one way they can help. And the other way they can help is definitely through funding. So in Burma, I think there are two ways that people can help support, fund the, let's just call this like the revolution. So like one way is that one thing that's happening in Burma is called the civil disobedience movement. You may have heard of that too. But basically what that movement is that there are a lot of government workers in Burma that are refusing to go to work because they don't accept the military as legitimate. So, they might be workers from the Central Bank of Burma. They might be workers from government control, hospitals or schools, right? So those, doctors, those teachers, they still like, teach people at home or, heal people at home, right? They're not like, leaving behind their responsibilities as a doctor, as a teacher, but they're not just doing it for the government, for the military council, if that makes sense. But because they do it to their local environment, they're not getting paid for that, right? So we're raising funds to provide for these teachers and these doctors so that they can continue to provide much needed services to their communities without having to go to work, because they're not getting the salary, right? So there are a lot of verify fundraisers and websites that Americans can donate to. And the other way the Americans can donate is they can donate to the internally displaced people. So the military, in their effort to weaken the armed ethnic groups and in their effort to divide the people further, they would perform airstrikes onto the regions where a lot of the ethnic minorities are living. So a lot of people, their villages were destroyed and their livelihoods were destroyed, their farms, everything destroyed. So they had to run away from where they're living. And they don't have a home, they had to leave everything behind, so they don't even have clothes, right? So if if Americans can chip in $20, $30, which is of course it might be more than like an hour's wage for some people, but like even $20 can go a long way in somewhere like Burma, where there's a lot of inflation. Those are the two main ways that I can think of that people can donate. People can help.
Tuang, do you have any ways that people like me can get involved and learn more?
So we will have a strong interim government. So that will be coming up very soon. So this is very important for us, for the American people, for the international community to recognize these, the interim government.
The interim government that Go Emtuang was referring to, they're called the Committee Representing Bidangzu Luto.
CRPH is just a kind of the temporary, the representing the But I mentioned about interim government. Is the CRPH going to form one interim government?
Yeah. So the CRPH is basically made up of some members from the Burmese parliament that were supposed to be inaugurated on February 1st had it not been for the coup. So they're actually, you know, working, basically they're a government in exile because they're working from, you know, out of the country, they had to run away, and they're working on forming the interim government, and then they need legitimacy, and they need to be like considered as the legitimate government by the international community. And then just one last thing that I want to add is that in terms of like foreign aid, you know, humanitarian aid, especially in the United States, like foreign aid gets a bad rap because, you know, people are like, okay, we have a lot of homelessness in this country, we have like racial inequality in this country. Like all of those are true, right? I'm not denying that, you know, I'm not denying that we should not care about homeless people or veterans or anything like that. We should, right? But when you actually look at how the United States spend their money, foreign aid is like it's negligible. It's like nothing. And you know, a lot of money goes to places where it shouldn't go to. I'm not gonna get into that. It's kind of political, right? But like just because you give like an extra, I don't know, 1 billion to like Burma, it's not gonna take away from, you know, the money that goes to veterans or homeless people. So that's just one thing that I want to like, I hope the American people know that like foreign aid is just like small, a tiny portion. It's not even like, I don't know what percent, but basically like they would spend like more than like 40% or so on the Department of Defense, but then like on homelessness they would spend only a little bit, right? But then even less than that they spend on foreign aid. So you know, you just, it just goes to show that foreign aid is just an insignificant amount. So sometimes, you know, foreign aid is used, you know, by politicians to say, oh, you know, the government doesn't care about, you know, us, like our own government doesn't care about what's happening in the country, they only care about other countries. But that's not true, because what they're giving to other countries is just a small amount. So I hope Americans know that as well.